They say talking to yourself is a sign of insanity. But I think that's only if you answer back, right? Right. This is Talking to Myself, the art advice podcast where I use anecdotes from my life, try to make myself a better artist, and possibly a better person. Hopefully other people can get use out of this as well, but mostly I'm just trying to avoid paying for therapy. Today on the podcast, I thought we'd talk about planning, preparation, futility, the hole in the center of everything. No, not that last one. And I'll bring this up before I get into the anecdote. I'll just mention that you guys have heard the phrase, if you build it, they will come, right? From the Kevin Costner baseball movie. This is my exploration of that phrase and doing some thinking, listening to art podcasts and things like that. I've come to the realization that it's not quite accurate for art. My goal has always been make whatever I think is best, and eventually people will find you, you'll find your audience, and then you can be successful selling the art. I'm not sure that's exactly how it works. I mean, those are necessary components. Let's get to the anecdote. As it comes to a surprise to absolutely no one, I used to be heavily into D&D. All through college, high school actually, and in college after. I was just old enough for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons to be new when I was in high school, so I've seen a lot of D&D come and go. And my group, which consisted of my best friends in high school and college later, we had one DM who was the best, most prepared DM I have ever seen in my life. I think I've mentioned him before on the podcast. This man, when it comes to world building, this guy was Tolkien, right? He did have some languages he made up. Not as extensive as Tolkien. He didn't have the training. He was a writer by trade, so clearly world building was sort of his thing. But if you went into a city in his world, he knew what all the buildings were, who lived there, what it was like last season for the growth or the harvest, and he knew all this stuff. So he was prepared. He was truly prepared for open world adventuring, which was great for D&D. Because in D&D, if you're not familiar, the dungeon master, the head of the game, the guy guiding the story, doesn't have a lot of control over what the characters do. He basically tells them what the environment is, they interact with it, he tells them the consequences. That's sort of how it works. You're telling a collaborative story together, but he doesn't really guide the story. And that is part of the problem with his method of spending all that time and all that effort world building, because I know for a fact there were dungeons, there were whole cities that he designed and built that he suggested we should go to for clues, or we should go to for leads for adventures or whatever, and we just ignored it. Our party was like, we don't want to do that. We want to do this instead. No matter how prepared you are, that kind of thing can throw you off, I think. The reason I'm mentioning this is that even though we were constantly undermining his efforts and making it difficult for him, he was still the best DM we ever had because of that preparation. Because once we did pick a direction, he had at least a background of what was happening. But in order to have that coverage for this unpredictable, crazy group of people he was dealing with, he had to have coverage for everything, which is a lot of work. And it asks a lot of a dungeon master to have that much preparation set up for a gaming session. Other DMs in our group, including myself, would not put that much effort in, and if the group decided to go hard left on what we were doing, we were not prepared at all. You have to suddenly wing it, which led to us not running games as often as this guy. He was content to be Dungeon Master all the time. He didn't want to play, he wanted to run the game. Which is perfect for us, because most of the time we did not want to run the game knowing how difficult as a group we could be. This relates back to art and my philosophy that may or may not be warping into something else. I want to just make the things that I like, that I think are cool, and sell those things. I mean, selling them for money is not my main goal. I want to make them because I like to make them. I'm hoping to make money off them despite not trying to make them for money, if you can follow that logic. That's one of the reasons I don't do fan art for sale. I do fan art occasionally, but it's because I'm a fan of something, the way the fan art should be, I think. I think doing fan art for sale is kind of a slippery slope, because you end up finding yourself chasing money. I don't want to be forced to do fan art for something I'm not a fan of just because it's popular. That kind of takes all the fun out of making art for me. Now, if art was my only income and I was desperate to make it my only income, maybe that wouldn't be a decision I wouldn't have the luxury to make. Maybe I'd have to make fan art because that's what sells. But I'd like to think that if I persevere with making the stuff I like and the benefit of not having art be my main source of income, eventually I can get an audience that'll like it and I'll start selling. Now, that was my idea. That was my plan, as such as it is. But I gotta tell you, I've been doing this a few years and it doesn't seem to be working like that, really. I'm missing a key component here. It's not if you build it, they will come. I think it's more like you build it because you have to, and they may come, which sounds a lot more uncertain and is not great advice. It's not very inspiring, is it? It doesn't make you want to go out and start making stuff in the hopes that people will be excited by it and want to have it. But you have to have that preparation. You have to be prepared. So when the interest shows up, you have stuff to sell. If that's your goal, to sell something to these people. Or to share, at least. Even just share. Forget about money. If you start doing posts on Instagram every day, like horror art, you need to have horror art ready to post on Instagram because that's what people are going to want to see. You know, you're cultivating an audience based on what you're doing. So you have to have things for them to see. That's obvious. But I think there's an aspect of this that I'm ignoring, and it's costing me essentially a career. And that's the oily, gross marketing stuff. Now, I don't know a lot about marketing, but I know that you have to build an audience, especially if you're not doing something piggybacking on an interest that's already out there, like fan art. You have to build an audience yourself, or it doesn't matter how good your art is. The best art in the world does attract people a little bit more, maybe, but they still have to see it in order to be attracted to it. So yes, being technically good is very important. Being communicative and expressive and definitely being the best artist you can be and producing the best art you can make are very important. But it's not enough. Being so good they can't ignore you doesn't work in a system like art, especially when you're trying to market online, because ignoring someone is really easy. It's like the default, actually. There's so much stuff out there to see. And a lot of it is still just passed on to people by word of mouth. Someone sees something they really like, they maybe 5% chance, if you're lucky, pass it on to someone else, and then the chain propagates that way. But you're talking about super low percentages. What you need to do is get people that come to associate you with good, or you with things they like, and then they start following you, not just randomly checking out an image that they happen to like. Not to say that I have any idea how to do this. People have written books about marketing online, and I have not read any of them. I've listened to a few lectures. I've seen some YouTube videos. They have some of the similar points. I'm going to try a few things that they've mentioned, but I have to decide how much I'm willing to do effort-wise to get an audience based against how much I'm willing to do producing art. They're both very important. And up until now, I've been ignoring the second part. I've been focusing on just making the best product I can. It's not product. You're not selling it. I've been focusing on making the best art I can, putting that out there, and then hoping that it would generate an audience. And that does happen organically, but very, very slowly. Not quickly enough to make a difference. It's like trying to build momentum by pushing a train uphill. It's just not going to work. You need an engine in that thing. And I'm going to have to figure out a way to do that to make it more successful. It's just, I thought I'd share this idea that there's a component to having success in selling art or having a self-sustaining art career that I've been neglecting. And since this show is almost entirely about me talking to myself, hence the title, here's my message to my future self. Hey, future self. Did you ever manage to pay off that credit card? Probably not, depending on how far in the future this is. Assuming the world hasn't burned to the ground and there's no such thing as credit cards anymore. After a day of fighting the wasteland mutants, have you considered marketing for your art career in the post-apocalyptic world? But no, seriously, future self, you need to start thinking more about how you build an audience. Make sure you promote yourself, not overtly, not greasily, but in a natural manner that lets people find you. Because it's not sleazy to reach your audience. You actually do provide a useful service that these people would enjoy. So don't feel bad about it at all. Don't feel bad about that, putting that out there and getting in front of people at all. You should be fine with that. I know you won't go too far and shove it down people's throats because that is completely distasteful. Just try and do better. Hopefully someone else can get a little bit out of that. I don't know. Maybe. Thanks everybody for listening. I appreciate you checking out the podcast. Special thanks to my supporters on Patreon. You guys get to hear and see these a week earlier than everyone else, along with some extra things, and you are the shiniest people I know. Till next time, everyone take care. Don't neglect the promotion part of your art business. Certainly don't neglect the technical training part of your art business. And I hope everything's going well for you. Take care.